The woman's hands wouldn't stop shaking on the steering wheel. Jane Mitchell had been driving for 2 hours through the worst blizzard Chicago had seen in a decade, and she still couldn't feel her fingers. The heater in her 12-year-old Honda had died somewhere around mile 40, and now the windshield wipers struggled against snow that fell like divine punishment. She should pull over. She knew that. But where? Into which dark parking lot? Which silent street? Which cold corner of a city that suddenly felt like it belonged to everyone but her? I can't do this, Jane. A baby? Now? This wasn't the plan. George's voice still echoed in her skull, sharp and final. 3 hours ago, he'd been her boyfriend of 2 years, the man she'd imagined building a life with. Then she'd shown him the positive pregnancy test, and he'd transformed into a stranger who looked at her like she'd ruined his life on purpose. This is your problem now. I'm done. He'd walked out of their apartment. His apartment, she corrected mentally, because her name had never been on the lease. And she'd stood there in the kitchen holding a plastic stick that said pregnant and listening to the door slam with such finality that the picture frames rattled. 8 weeks. That's all. A tiny cluster of cells smaller than a raspberry, and already it had cost her everything. Jane's vision blurred. She blinked hard, trying to focus on the road, but the white lines had disappeared beneath the snow, and the streetlights were nothing but distant halos in the storm. Her phone sat dead in the cup holder. No charger, no plan. No one to call, even if she had battery. Her mother had died when she was 19. Her father, 2 years later. No siblings. No close friends in this city she'd moved to for George's job. Just her. A baby she hadn't planned for. And a future that looked as dark as the road ahead. The tears came hot and fast, and Jane pressed her palm against her lower abdomen. A protective gesture. She'd already started doing without thinking. I'm sorry, she whispered to the tiny life inside her. I'm so sorry you're stuck with me. The car hit the ice patch at 50 miles per hour. 1 second Jane was crying. The next, the Honda spun like a coin on a table, tires shrieking, world tilting. She saw headlights, or maybe stars, streaking past the windshield in wild arcs. Her stomach lurched. Her hands yanked the wheel uselessly. Then the car left the road entirely. The impact came in stages. First the front bumper crunching into the guardrail, then the violent flip as momentum carried the car over, then the endless rolling, once, twice, 3 times. Metal screaming, glass shattering, Jane's body slamming against the seatbelt so hard she couldn't breathe. When the world finally stopped moving, Jane hung upside down. Blood dripped from somewhere on her face. Her ears rang. Her chest felt crushed. Outside, snow fell silently through the broken windshield, landing on the steering wheel, on her suspended hands, on the dashboard now above her head. The baby. Panic exploded through the pain. Jane pressed both hands to her stomach, trying to feel, movement? Impossible at 8 weeks. But she pressed anyway, and the warm wetness between her legs made her sob. No, please. She tried to move, but the seatbelt held her suspended, and when she twisted, agony shot through her ribs. The door wouldn't open. The window was gone, but the frame was crumpled. She was trapped in an upside-down tomb, bleeding, freezing, and completely alone on a road no one traveled at midnight during a blizzard. Jane closed her eyes. Maybe this was better. Maybe this was the universe's way of solving the problem George hadn't wanted. Then she heard the car door. Not her door. That one was crushed beyond opening. But the passenger door, wrenching open with a metallic shriek that cut through the storm. Don't move. The voice was male, deep, and carried the kind of authority that made Jane's eyes snap open even though her body screamed to stay still. A man crouched at the passenger side opening, snow swirling around him, dark coat, dark hair, face half hidden in shadow. But his eyes, even through her blurred vision, Jane could see his eyes, and they were fixed on her with an intensity that should have frightened her. "I'm pregnant," she heard herself say. The words came out broken, desperate. 8 weeks. I'm bleeding. Please. The baby. The man went very still. Jane watched, something cross his face, something that looked almost like pain. But it was gone so fast she thought she'd imagined it. "I'm getting you out." His voice was calmer now, but there was something underneath it, something sharp. "The car's unstable. When I cut the seatbelt, you're going to fall. I'll catch you." I can't lose. You won't." He said it with such certainty that Jane almost believed him. "But I need you to trust me. Can you do that?" Jane didn't know this man, didn't know why. He'd stopped, why he was here, why he looked at her like she mattered. But she was upside down, bleeding, and alone, and he was offering his hands. "Okay," she whispered. He reached in with a knife. When had he taken out a knife? And sawed through the seatbelt in one clean motion. Jane dropped, and true to his word, he caught her. His arms closed around her back and legs, lifting her from the wreckage like she weighed nothing, and suddenly Jane was pressed against a chest that felt like stone, beneath expensive wool. The cold hit her immediately. The man carried her through snow that reached his knees, moving with purpose toward a car she could barely see through the storm. Something large and black and idling with its lights cutting through the white. "I'm getting blood on your coat," Jane mumbled. Her head felt heavy against his shoulder. "I don't care about the coat." He placed her in the back seat with surprising gentleness, then climbed in beside her. The driver, another man, younger, with nervous eyes, turned from the front. "Boss, should I?" "Drive to the estate. Call Dr. Chen. Tell him I need him there in 20 minutes. The man's hand pressed a cloth against the cut on Jane's forehead, applying pressure that hurt but felt necessary. "Tell him it's a pregnant woman, 8 weeks, possible miscarriage. He brings everything." The car moved fast and smooth despite the storm. Jane tried to focus on the man's face, but exhaustion pulled at her. I don't even know your name." "Ferdinand." He kept pressure on her forehead with one hand, while his other hand, larger, warmer, rested on her arm. Not restraining, anchoring. "What's yours?" "Jane." She pressed her hand to her stomach again, feeling the warm wetness spreading. "Jane Mitchell. I can't afford a hospital. I don't have insurance anymore. George canceled me when he..." Her voice broke. "Please don't leave me at a hospital. I can't pay. I'll find a way to pay you back, but please..." "Jane." Ferdinand's voice cut through her panic. "Look at me." She did. His eyes were gray, she realized. Gray like the storm, but warmer somehow. "You're not going to a hospital. You're coming to my home. My doctor will take care of you there. And you're not paying me back because you don't owe me anything. Do you understand?" Jane didn't understand. Didn't understand why a stranger would do this, why he looked at her like she was something precious instead of a problem, why his jaw was set like he was angry. Not at her, but at something else entirely. "Why?" she whispered. Ferdinand's hand tightened on her arm, just slightly. "Because no woman should be alone tonight. Especially not you." The car drove deeper into the storm, and Jane let her eyes close, feeling the warmth of the heated seats beneath her, the steady pressure of Ferdinand's hand keeping her grounded, and the terrifying hope that maybe, the tiny life inside her could still survive this. She didn't know she was being carried into the home of Chicago's most dangerous man. She didn't know that Ferdinand Torini had built an empire on violence and fear, that men crossed the street when they saw him coming, that his name was whispered in the same breath as warnings. All she knew was that when she'd begged the universe not to let her die alone, someone had answered. Even if that someone had blood on his hands that no amount of washing would ever clean. Jane woke to silence so complete it felt like death. No traffic. No sirens. No radiator clanking in a too small apartment. Just thick, blanketed quiet that made her heart race before she even opened her eyes. The pain came next. Her ribs ached with every breath. Her head throbbed where the cut had been. But lower. Her hand moved instinctively to her stomach. There was a different kind of ache. Cramping. Not severe but persistent. The kind that made fear taste like copper on her tongue. The baby. Jane's eyes snapped open. The room was enormous. Cathedral ceilings. Windows that stretched from floor to ceiling, currently showing nothing but white. Snow still falling in sheets outside. The bed beneath her was massive, with sheets that felt like liquid silk, and the walls were painted a soft gray that should have felt cold, but somehow didn't. This wasn't a hospital. This was someone's home. Ferdinand's home. Memory returned in fragments. The crash. The man pulling her from the wreckage. The car ride where she'd bled all over leather seats that probably cost more than her entire year's rent. Jane sat up slowly, ignoring the protest from her ribs. She was wearing clothes that weren't hers. Soft cotton pajamas. Expensive. Far too big. Her own clothes were gone. Someone had cleaned the blood off her face, bandaged the cut on her forehead, tucked her into this bed like she belonged here. The door opened. Jane's breath caught as Ferdinand entered, carrying a tray. He looked different in daylight, or whatever pale gray light managed to filter through the storm, taller than she'd realized, broader. His face was angular, sharp jawline covered by short, dark stubble, and those gray eyes fixed on her with an intensity that made her want to look away and keep staring simultaneously. He wore all black, dress shirt with sleeves rolled to his elbows, revealing forearms roped with muscle and a tattoo she could only partially see. No tie, top button undone. He looked like he should be in a boardroom commanding empires, not delivering breakfast to a stranger. "You're awake." Ferdinand set the tray on the bedside table. "Dr. Chen said you'd probably sleep until noon. What time is it?" 3 in the afternoon. You've been asleep for 14 hours. Jane's hand went to her stomach again. "The baby is fine." Ferdinand's voice softened, just slightly. Dr. Chen did an ultrasound. Heartbeat is strong. The bleeding was from the impact, but the pregnancy is stable. You have bruised ribs, a mild concussion, and you were severely dehydrated. He left instructions. Ferdinand gestured to the tray. "You need to eat, drink water, rest for at least 3 days." Jane stared at the tray. Soup that smelled like it came from a real kitchen, not a can. Fresh bread, orange juice in a crystal glass, a small vial of prenatal vitamins she definitely hadn't had before. "I don't understand." Her voice came out smaller than she intended. "Why are you doing this?" Ferdinand pulled a chair close to the bed, a leather wingback that looked like it belonged in a library, and sat. He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he studied her with those unsettling gray eyes, like he was trying to decide how much truth she could handle. "You were in trouble," he finally said. "I helped, that's all." "No one just helps. Not like this." Jane gestured around the room, at the luxury she didn't belong in. This is too much. I should go. I'll find somewhere." "Where?" Ferdinand's voice was quiet but firm. "Where will you go, Jane?" The question hit like a physical blow. Jane's mouth opened, then closed. Because the truth was, nowhere. She had nowhere. The apartment had been George's. Her savings had been drained 3 months ago when her car needed repairs. She had exactly $247 in her checking account, and a baby coming in 7 months. "I'll figure something out," she said, hating how her voice wavered. "I always do. You almost died last night." "I know. You were driving in a blizzard with no destination, no phone charge, no plan." Ferdinand leaned forward slightly. "What were you running from?" Jane's jaw tightened. "That's not your business." "You made it my business when I pulled you out of that car." "I didn't ask you to. You begged me not to leave you." Ferdinand's voice stayed level, but something flickered in his eyes. "You said, 'Please don't leave me here, I'm pregnant and alone.' Those were your exact words." Shame burned through Jane's chest. She looked away, focusing on the snow falling outside the massive windows. "I don't remember saying that." "I do." Silence stretched between them. Jane could hear her own heartbeat in her ears, could feel the weight of this stranger's attention like something physical. "The father," Ferdinand said quietly. "George. He left you." It wasn't a question. Jane's head snapped back toward him. "How do you know his name?" "You said it. In the car. You were half-conscious, talking about insurance he'd canceled." Ferdinand's expression remained neutral, but his hands, resting on the arms of the chair, had tightened slightly. "He threw you out." "He didn't throw me out. I left. After he told you the baby was your problem." Jane's throat closed. She didn't know how this man could see through her so easily, how he could take the story she'd barely processed herself and lay it out like evidence. "Why do you care?" "I don't like men who abandon pregnant women." Ferdinand stood, moving to the window. His back was to her, shoulders broad beneath the black shirt. "My father was one of them." The admission hung in the air. Jane stared at his back, at the rigid line of his spine, and realized he'd just given her something. A piece of himself. A reason. "I'm sorry," she said softly. "Don't be sorry. Just eat the soup before it gets cold." Ferdinand turned, and the vulnerability she'd glimpsed was gone, replaced by that controlled intensity. "Dr. Chen will be back tomorrow morning to check on you. You have bruising on?" "Your ribs, so no sudden movements. The bathroom is through that door. There are clothes in the closet. They'll be too big, but they're clean. I can't stay here." "You can't leave. The storm's been upgraded to a blizzard warning. Roads are closed. Even if they weren't." Ferdinand crossed his arms. "Where would you go on Christmas Day with no money, no car, and a concussion?" Christmas Day. Jane had completely forgotten. Yesterday had been Christmas Eve. George had left her on Christmas Eve, and she'd crashed her car, and now she was in a stranger's mansion wearing borrowed pajamas while the rest of the world celebrated. "I'll leave as soon as the road's clear," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "And go where?" "I'll find a shelter. There are places—" "No." The word came out sharp, final. Ferdinand's jaw tightened. "You're not going to a shelter. You don't get to decide that. You're 8 weeks pregnant, recovering from a car accident, and you have nowhere safe to go. So, yes, actually, I do get to decide." Ferdinand moved closer, stopping at the foot of the bed. "You stay here until you figure out your next step. No conditions, no payment. You eat, you rest, you heal. When you're ready, we'll talk about options." Jane's chest tightened. Pride warred with desperation, and she hated that desperation was winning. "I don't even know you." "My name is Ferdinand Torini. I'm 36. I own several businesses in Chicago. I live alone in this house. I don't have family, and I'm offering you a safe place to stay until you're strong enough to make a real plan." He paused. "What else do you need to know?" Everything, Jane thought. Why you were driving through a storm at midnight. Why you carry a knife. Why you ordered your driver around like he was a soldier. Why men probably fear you even though you're being gentle with me. But she was so tired. Her ribs hurt. Her head hurt. And the soup smelled so good, it made her stomach cramp with hunger she'd been ignoring for days. 3 days, she heard herself say. I'll stay 3 days, until Dr. Chen clears me, then I'm gone. Something that might have been amusement flickered across Ferdinand's face. We'll see. He left without another word, closing the door softly behind him. Jane sat alone in the massive bed, in the massive room, in the mansion of a man who'd saved her life, and was now refusing to let her leave. She should be terrified, should be planning her escape, should be questioning every decision that led to this moment. Instead, she picked up the soup spoon and took a bite. It was the best thing she'd tasted in months. Outside, snow continued to fall, burying the world in white, and somewhere in the house below, Ferdinand Torini stood in his office and tried to remember the last time he'd let anyone stay in his home. 20 years, he realized. Not since his mother died. Jane's 3 days became a week, not because Ferdinand forced her, though he did have an infuriating way of appearing whenever she mentioned leaving, but because Dr. Chen kept finding reasons she shouldn't travel yet. Bruising not fully healed, cramping still present, blood pressure lower than ideal. Each visit ended with the same recommendation. Another few days, just to be safe. Jane suspected Ferdinand was paying him to say that. She had no proof, but the way the doctor glanced at Ferdinand before delivering his verdict felt rehearsed. Still, she stayed. The house was a contradiction. Enormous but empty. Luxurious but cold. Jane had counted 23 rooms. She'd explored when Ferdinand was gone, which seemed to be most days, and every single one was immaculate, expensive, and completely impersonal. No family photos, no sentimental objects, nothing that indicated a human being actually lived here instead of just existing in it. Except the library. Jane found it on day 4, tucked into the west wing behind a door she'd assumed led to storage. Instead, she'd opened it to discover floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, a fireplace large enough to stand in, and windows that overlooked snow-covered gardens that looked like something from a period film. The books were what stopped her breath. Thousands of them. Literature, history, philosophy. Many in Italian. Some so worn the spines were cracked and faded, clearly read repeatedly. These weren't decorator books. These were loved. Jane had been standing there, running her fingers over the spines, when Ferdinand's voice came from behind. Her. You read. She'd spun, startled. He stood in the doorway, dressed in another dark suit, looking like he'd just come from somewhere important. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to. It's fine. Ferdinand moved into the room, and suddenly it felt smaller. Take whatever you want. These are yours? My mother's, originally. He stopped at a shelf, pulling down a copy of The Count of Monte Cristo so worn the cover was held together with tape. She read to me in Italian when I was young. After she died, I kept them. Jane watched him hold the book, saw the way his thumb brushed the spine with unconscious gentleness. This was the first real thing she'd learned about him. Not the controlled answers he gave when she asked questions, but something true. She taught you to love reading, Jane said softly. She taught me that books were safe. People disappoint you. Stories don't. Ferdinand placed the book back carefully. You can use this room whenever you want. The fire's on a timer, if you need heat. He'd left before Jane could respond, but she'd spent the rest of the day curled in the leather chair by the fireplace, reading Dumas in English while snow fell outside, and wondering who Ferdinand Torini really was. The answer came in pieces. She learned he left before dawn most days and returned after dark, that he worked from the office downstairs. She could hear his voice sometimes, speaking rapid Italian on phone calls that sounded intense, that he had people who came to the house occasionally, men in expensive suits who looked at Jane with curiosity she didn't trust. She learned he was meticulous about meals. 3 times a day, food appeared, always fresh, always carefully portioned, always including something she'd mentioned liking. When she'd commented the soup was good, soup appeared daily. When she'd said she missed coffee but couldn't have caffeine, decaf espresso showed up at breakfast. Someone was paying attention. And she learned, on day 7, that Ferdinand had nightmares. Jane had gone downstairs for water. Her room had a bathroom but no kitchenette. And she'd heard it. A sound from the room at the end of the hall, the one she'd assumed was Ferdinand's, though she'd never seen inside. A shout, raw and painful, followed by silence so sudden it felt violent. She should have gone back upstairs, respected his privacy. Instead, Jane found herself standing outside his door, hand raised to knock, heart pounding. The door opened before she could make contact. Ferdinand stood in the doorway wearing only dark sleep pants, his chest bare, and Jane forgot how to breathe. He was all muscle and ink, a tattoo stretched across his ribs that she couldn't fully see in the dim light, and his skin gleamed with sweat like he'd been fighting something. "Jane?" His voice was rough, still half caught in whatever dream had held him. "What are you doing up?" "I heard..." She stopped, unsure how to say "I heard you screaming" without making it worse. "Are you... okay?" "I'm fine." He wasn't fine. His breathing was too fast, his eyes too dark. But Jane recognized the look. She'd worn it herself enough times. The look that said, "Don't ask, don't push, don't make me talk about it." "Okay," she said quietly. Then, because she couldn't help herself, "Do you need water?" Something in Ferdinand's expression shifted, softened, almost imperceptibly. "I have water." "Right, of course." Jane stepped back. "I'll just go back to bed." She turned to leave, but his voice stopped her. "Jane." She looked over her shoulder. Ferdinand's hand was braced against the door frame, and he looked exhausted in a way that had nothing to do with sleep. "Thank you for checking." Jane nodded, then walked back to her room, acutely aware of his eyes following her, until she disappeared around the corner. The next morning, Ferdinand was different. Not obviously. He still worked from his office, still made calls in Italian, still moved through the house like a ghost. But when Jane came down for breakfast, he was sitting at the kitchen island drinking espresso, and he didn't leave when she entered. "Dr. Chen's coming this afternoon," he said without preamble. "If he clears you, you can leave tomorrow, if you want to." Jane poured herself decaf coffee from the pot that had clearly been made for her. "You want me gone." "I didn't say that. You're giving me permission to leave. That's the same thing." Ferdinand set down his cup. "I'm giving you a choice. There's a difference." Jane sat across from him, cradling her mug. The kitchen was massive, but somehow felt intimate with just the two of them in it. Morning light filtered through the windows, making Ferdinand's gray eyes look almost silver. "I don't have anywhere to go," she admitted. The words tasted like failure. "I've been looking at apartments online. Everything I can afford is not safe. Not for a baby. Then don't leave. I can't stay here forever." "Why not?" Jane laughed, but it came out bitter. "Because this isn't real. This is..." She gestured around the pristine kitchen, the sub-zero refrigerator, the marble countertops. "This is temporary charity. Eventually you'll want your house back, your privacy, your life without a pregnant stranger taking up space." "You're not taking up space." Ferdinand leaned forward, and the intensity of his focus made Jane's breath catch. "You think I offer this to everyone? You think I bring women home and let them live in my house?" "I don't know what you do. I don't. Ever. You're the first person who stayed here in 20 years. His jaw tightened. "So stop calling it charity. You're not a burden I'm tolerating. You're—" He stopped, seeming to reconsider his words. "You're welcome here, for as long as you need." Jane's chest felt tight. "Why?" "Because you deserve better than a shelter. Because that baby deserves a mother who isn't exhausted and terrified. And because—" Ferdinand stood abruptly, turning toward the window. "Because I know what it's like to watch someone you love disappear, because they had nowhere safe to go." The admission hung between them. Jane watched the rigid line of Ferdinand's back, the way his hands were fisted at his sides, and realized she was seeing under the armor. The nightmare last night, the empty house, the books that belonged to a dead mother. "What happened to her?" Jane asked quietly. "Your mother." Ferdinand didn't turn around. "My father's fists. When I was 8. She was 7 months pregnant." His voice was flat, emotionless, but Jane heard what lived underneath. "I watched her bleed out on our kitchen floor while my father ran. She died because no one came. Because she had nowhere to go. Because she was alone." Jane's hand covered her mouth. "So yes," Ferdinand continued, finally turning. His eyes were harder now, distant. "You can leave tomorrow if you want. I won't stop you. But you're not going to die alone in some roach-infested apartment because you're too proud to accept help. I won't watch that happen again." He left the kitchen before Jane could respond, his footsteps echoing down the hall. Jane sat alone, her coffee growing cold, and finally understood. Ferdinand wasn't saving her out of kindness. He was saving the ghost of his mother. And maybe, Jane thought as she pressed her hand to her stomach, that was okay. Maybe they could save each other from the ghosts that haunted them. Outside, snow had finally stopped falling, and the sun broke through the clouds for the first time in 8 days. Dr. Chen didn't clear her. "Blood pressure's still lower than I'd like," he said, packing away his equipment. "And the cramping. You said it's worse at night?" Jane nodded, sitting on the edge of her bed. 3 weeks had passed since the accident. 3 weeks of living in Ferdinand's enormous silent house, of reading in the library, of careful conversations over breakfast when he was home. 3 weeks of pretending she wasn't getting used to this. "It's probably stress," Dr. Chen continued, giving her a look that felt paternal. "You need rest, real rest. At least another 2 weeks before we discuss you living independently." After he left, Jane found Ferdinand in his office, the one room she hadn't explored, mostly because the door was always closed and she could hear him conducting business in Italian through the walls. She knocked, waited. The door opened. Ferdinand stood in the doorway, phone in one hand, expression guarded. Behind him, Jane glimpsed dark wood, leather chairs, and a massive desk covered in papers. He ended the call without ceremony. "Dr. Chen said, 2 more weeks, I know." Ferdinand stepped aside, gesturing her in. "He called me after he left." Of course he did. Jane entered the office, taking in the controlled opulence. This room felt more lived in than the rest of the house. Books stacked on surfaces, an empty espresso cup, a suit jacket draped over a chair. "I'm sorry," she said. "I know you didn't sign up for a permanent house guest." "Stop apologizing." Ferdinand closed the door, which felt significant somehow. More intimate. "You're staying. It's decided." "You can't just decide." "I can, actually. It's my house." He moved to the window, hands in his pockets. "Besides, you're not a burden. You've reorganized my entire library by author and era. That alone earns you at least 6 months. Jane felt her lips twitch despite herself. You noticed. I notice everything. Ferdinand turned, and his eyes caught hers. I notice you don't sleep well, that you eat half a meal and pretend you're full, that you look at baby clothes online and then close the browser like it hurts to hope. Jane's throat tightened. She looked away, focusing on a painting on the wall, abstract, dark colors, the kind that probably cost more than a car. I'm not used to people paying attention, she admitted quietly. George didn't. George saw what he wanted to see. Then George was an idiot. Yeah. Certainty in Ferdinand's voice made Jane's chest ache. She turned back to him, studying his face. The sharp angles, the gray eyes that saw too much, the controlled power he wore like a second skin. Can I ask you something? She said. Always. What do you actually do? For work, I mean. Jane gestured around the office. You have people coming here. You make calls in Italian. You leave in suits and come back looking like... She trailed off, unsure how to finish. Like what? Like you've been to war. Ferdinand's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. What do you think I do? I think you're involved in something most people would call dangerous. I think those men who visit aren't business partners in the traditional sense. And I think... Jane took a breath. I think you've been protecting me from knowing the truth because you're afraid I'll leave. Silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken things. You're not wrong, Ferdinand finally said. He moved to his desk, poured 2 glasses of water from a crystal decanter, and handed her one. I run an organization. It's been in my family for 3 generations. We handle problems for people who can't go to authorities. That's vague. It's intentional. Are you a criminal? Ferdinand's jaw tightened. By legal definition? Yes. By my own moral code? No. I don't hurt innocent people. I don't traffic drugs or weapons. I don't touch anything that involves children or exploitation. He paused. But I do things that would make you uncomfortable. Things that require violence sometimes. Jane should have been afraid. Should have been backing toward the door, planning her escape. Instead, she found herself asking, Have you killed people? Yes. The answer came without hesitation, without apology. People who deserved it, Ferdinand continued, his voice steady. Men who hurt women, who abuse children, who prey on the vulnerable. I don't lose sleep over them. But you do lose sleep. Jane gestured toward the door. I've heard you. At night. Ferdinand set down his glass carefully. That's different. How? Because those nightmares aren't about the men I've killed. They're about the people I couldn't save. He looked at her directly, and Jane saw something raw in his expression. My mother, my sister, others. Jane's heart clenched. You have a sister? Had. Ferdinand's voice went flat. Elena. She was 6 when our mother died. Child services took her. I was 8. 2. Young to fight for custody. Too traumatized to function. They separated us. By the time I was old enough to find her, He stopped, jaw working. She'd been in 12 different foster homes. 3 were abusive. 1 was... His hands fisted. She was 14 when she disappeared. I've looked for 22 years. I'll never stop looking. Jane's eyes burned. She set down her own glass, moving closer without thinking. Ferdinand, I'm telling you this so you understand. He met her gaze, and the intensity there stole her breath. I don't do good things, Jane. I'm not a good man. But I have one rule that I will never break. I protect women and children. Always. No matter the cost. That's not negotiable. That's why you stopped, Jane said softly. That night. When you found me. I saw you protecting your stomach even while unconscious. And Ferdinand's voice roughened. I saw my mother, lying on that kitchen floor, alone, dying. And I swore I would never drive past that, again. Jane's hand moved to her stomach instinctively. I'm not your mother. I know. And you're not responsible for saving me. I know that too. Ferdinand stepped closer, close enough that Jane could see the flecks of darker gray in his eyes. But I'm asking you to let me anyway. Stay. Not as charity. Not as penance. Just stay. Why? Jane whispered. You barely know me. Because you're the first person in 20 years who's made this house feel less empty. The admission seemed to cost him. Because you reorganize my books and drink your decaf coffee in the library and you don't flinch when I come home in a bad mood. Because... He stopped, then continued quietly. Because I want you here. Jane's breath caught. This was dangerous territory. She was pregnant with another man's baby, living in the home of someone who'd just admitted to being a criminal, letting herself feel safe for the first time in months. I'm still pregnant, she said, needing to say it out loud. With George's baby. That doesn't change. I don't care whose DNA it has. Ferdinand's voice was fierce. That baby's going to be born. You're going to need help. I can provide that help. Everything else. He gestured vaguely. We'll figure out as we go. This is insane. Probably. People will talk. Let them. You're a mobster. Allegedly. The corner of Ferdinand's mouth twitched, almost a smile. Technically, I'm a businessman with diverse interests. Despite everything, Jane felt herself smile back. That's the worst euphemism I've ever heard. I'm working on it. They stood there, close enough to touch, not touching. Outside, afternoon light filtered through the windows, turning everything golden. Jane could hear her own heartbeat, could feel the flutter in her stomach that might have been the baby, or might have been something else entirely. If I stay, she said carefully, I need to contribute. I can't just live here for free. You're not. I need to feel useful. Ferdinand, please. He studied her for a long moment, then nodded. The library needs proper cataloging, not just by author, but by subject, language, first edition status. It would take months, if you're interested. Jane felt something loosen in her chest. A job. Purpose. I'd like that. Good. Ferdinand stepped back, putting professional distance between them again. We'll discuss salary. No money. Jane. Room and board is enough. More than enough. She crossed her arms. Non-negotiable. Ferdinand's expression shifted into something that might have been exasperation or respect. You're stubborn. You're controlling. Protective. Same thing. It's really not. They stared at each other, and then Jane laughed. Actually laughed, for the first time since the accident. It felt strange. Good. Like something thawing. Okay, she said. I'll stay. I'll catalog your library, and we'll figure out the rest. Deal. Ferdinand extended his hand formally. Jane took it, feeling the warmth of his palm, the controlled strength. They shook once, professional, but neither let go immediately. Thank you, Jane said quietly, for telling me the truth, for not lying about who you are. I'll never lie to you. Ferdinand's thumb brushed across her knuckles, so brief it might have been accidental. That's my promise." He released her hand and turned back to his desk, effectively dismissing her. Jane left the office, closing the door softly behind her, and stood in the hallway with her hand pressed to her stomach. She was staying in the home of a mobster who killed people but saved her, who had nightmares about his dead mother and missing sister, who looked at Jane like she mattered. This was insane, but Jane had been playing it safe her whole life, and where had that gotten her? Abandoned, pregnant, and crashed in a ditch. Maybe insane was exactly what she needed. The man appeared on a Tuesday morning in early February. Jane saw him from the library window, a black SUV pulling up the long driveway, parking near the fountain that had been drained for winter. The man who emerged wore an expensive suit and moved with the kind of confidence that set her nerves on edge. She was 5 months pregnant now, showing enough that strangers smiled at her in the rare moments Ferdinand let her leave the estate. The baby, a girl Dr. Chen had confirmed last week, kicked constantly, especially when Jane read aloud from the Italian novels in the library. Ferdinand had been different lately, more present. He worked from home more often, joined her for meals, spent evenings in the library while she cataloged and he read. They'd fallen into an easy rhythm, almost domestic, and Jane had stopped questioning why it felt so natural. Until now. The doorbell rang. Unusual, because people who visited Ferdinand never used the front door. Jane heard voices in the foyer, tense and rapid in Italian. Then footsteps approaching the library. Ferdinand appeared in the doorway, and Jane's stomach dropped. She'd learned to read his expressions over the past months, and this one, controlled fury barely leashed, meant trouble. "Jane." His voice was carefully neutral. "Someone wants to meet you." The man from the SUV stepped around Ferdinand. Mid-40s, sharp features, eyes that calculated and dismissed in the same glance. He smiled, but it didn't reach those eyes. "Ms. Mitchell, I'm Marco Salvatore. I work with Ferdinand in certain business capacities." He extended his hand. Jane stood, conscious of her pregnant belly, and shook briefly. "Nice to meet you." "Likewise." Marco's gaze dropped to her stomach, lingered. Ferdinand didn't mention he had someone living here, especially someone in such a delicate condition. The way he said delicate condition made Jane's skin crawl. "Marco," Ferdinand's voice cut in, sharp as broken glass. "Whatever you have to say, you can say to me, privately." "Of course," Marco's smile widened. "But I wanted to meet the woman who's managed to domesticate Chicago's most ruthless wolf. That's quite an accomplishment." "She hasn't domesticated anything," Ferdinand said coldly. "Jane, go upstairs, please." Jane wanted to argue, but something in Ferdinand's eyes, a warning, almost pleading, made her nod. She left the library, climbing the stairs slowly, but she could hear their voices rising below. "You brought him to my home?" Ferdinand's voice, barely controlled. "He asked questions, Ferdinand. About you. About changes in your behavior. About why you've been refusing certain contracts. Those contracts involved hurting women. I don't do that. You've never cared before. I've always cared. I just didn't have a reason to make it a deal breaker." A pause. "Now I do." Jane pressed her hand against the wall, heart pounding. "She's a liability," Marco said, voice dropping but still audible. "Whoever she is, whatever she means to you, she's a weakness. And weaknesses get exploited in our world. You know, that. If anyone touches her, I will burn this entire organization to the ground." The certainty in Ferdinand's voice sent chills through Jane's body. "You'd start a war over a pregnant woman?" Marco sounded incredulous. "I'd start a war over this pregnant woman. Yes." Silence. Then Marco laughed, bitter, disbelieving. "You're in love with her." Get out of my house. Ferdinand, now. Before I forget, we've been business partners for 15 years. More footsteps, the front door slamming. Then, silence so complete Jane could hear her own heartbeat. She descended the stairs slowly. Ferdinand stood in the foyer, hands braced against the entry table, head bowed. He looked like he was holding himself together through sheer will. Ferdinand? His head snapped up. You should have stayed upstairs. I'm not good at following orders. Jane moved closer. Who was that really? Someone I used to trust. And now? Now I'm not sure. Ferdinand straightened, and Jane saw something in his face she'd never seen before. Uncertainty. Fear, almost. Jane, I need you to be honest with me. Do you feel safe here? Yes. Do you trust me? Yes. The answer came without hesitation. Ferdinand's jaw tightened. You shouldn't. Marco's right. I am a liability to you. People know about you now. They know you're living here. They'll use you to get to me. Then I'll leave. No. The word came out sharp, almost desperate. No, that's not. Ferdinand ran a hand through his hair, destroying its usual, perfect order. I can protect you here. Out there, alone, you're vulnerable. But I need you to understand what that means. I need you to know what you're choosing. I'm not choosing anything except staying alive and safe until this baby comes. That's not a choice. That's survival. Jane crossed her arms. Besides, you already promised you'd protect me. Are you taking that back? Never. Then we're done talking about it. Ferdinand stared at her, something fierce and unreadable in his expression. You're not afraid of me. Should I be? Most people are. I'm not most people. Jane moved closer, close enough to see the tension in his jaw, the slight tremor in his hands. You've had 2 months to hurt me. Instead, you fed me, sheltered me, and hired a doctor to monitor my pregnancy like I'm carrying royalty. So no, Ferdinand, I'm not afraid of you. You're pregnant and alone. You're afraid of everything. The truth of that hit harder than Jane expected. Her hand moved too, her stomach instinctively. Maybe. But not you. Never you. Something broke in Ferdinand's expression. He stepped forward, and suddenly his hand was on her face, gentle, reverent, trembling slightly. I can't let anything happen to you. Jane's breath caught. Nothing will. You don't know what I've done. What I'm capable of doing. His thumb brushed her cheekbone. If someone threatened you, there's no line I wouldn't cross. No rule I wouldn't break. And that should terrify you. It doesn't. Why not? Because, Jane's voice wavered. Because for the first time in my life, someone's choosing me. Not the convenient version of me. Not the version that fits their plans. Just me. Pregnant, broken, scared. And you're still here. Ferdinand's forehead dropped to hers, and they stood there in the foyer, breathing the same air, his hand still cradling her face like she was something precious. I'm not good at this, he whispered, caring, letting people in. Neither am I. We're a mess. Yeah. Jane's hands came up to his chest, feeling his heartbeat racing beneath her palms. We really are. They stood like that for a long moment, balanced on the edge of something neither had words for. Then Ferdinand's phone rang, shattering the moment. He pulled back, checking the screen, and his expression went cold. I have to take this. Okay, he answered in Italian, walking toward his office, but Jane caught one word repeated multiple times. Problema. Problem. She went back to the library, tried to focus on cataloging, but her hands wouldn't stop shaking. Marco's words echoed in her head. She's a liability. Weaknesses get exploited. Jane had spent 5 months feeling safe, protected, almost cared for. Now, for the first time since the accident, she wondered if staying here would get her killed. That night, Jane woke to voices. Not Ferdinand's nightmares. She'd learned to distinguish those. These were real, coming from downstairs. Men's voices, angry, speaking rapid, Italian. Jane slipped out of bed, moving as quietly as her pregnant body allowed. The voices were coming from Ferdinand's office. The door was closed, but she could hear them clearly. Can't protect her forever. I don't need forever. Just until the baby comes. Ferdinand's voice, steel underneath. And then what? You're going to play father to another man's child? Yes. Silence. Then laughter. Cruel, disbelieving. You've lost your mind. Probably, but that's my choice. It's a death sentence for both of you. Then I'll die protecting her. Better that than living without. Ferdinand stopped. Just go. Tell whoever sent you that Jane Mitchell is under my protection. Anyone who touches her answers to me, directly. More arguing, then footsteps. The front door, an engine starting. Jane pressed her back against the hallway wall, heart pounding, hand on her stomach where the baby kicked frantically. Ferdinand emerged from his office and stopped dead when he saw her. How much? Did you hear? Enough. Jane's voice shook. Enough to know I'm putting you in danger. I can handle danger. But should you have to, because of me? Tears burned her eyes. I'm nobody, Ferdinand. I'm just a woman who was stupid enough to get pregnant by the wrong man and then crash her car in a snowstorm. I'm not worth starting a war over. Ferdinand crossed the distance between them in 3 strides. His hands framed her face, forcing her to look at him. Don't you dare diminish yourself. It's the truth. The truth is, you're the strongest person I know. You survived abandonment. You survived an accident that should have killed you. You're growing a human being while living with a stranger who terrifies most people. His thumbs brushed away her tears. You're not nobody. You're everything. Jane's breath hitched. You barely know me. I know you reorganize books when you're anxious. That you talk to the baby when you think no one's listening. That you cry in the shower where you think I can't hear you. That you're terrified and brave in the same breath. Ferdinand's voice dropped to almost a whisper. I know that for 5 months, this empty house has felt like a home because you're in it. Ferdinand, I'm in love with you. The words came out rough, like they'd been torn from somewhere deep. I've been in love with you since you told me you were pregnant and begged me not to let your baby die. And I know it's insane. I know you're carrying another man's child. I know I'm the last person who should be saying this, but I am not letting you go. Not to danger, not to fear, not to anything. Jane stared at him, speechless, feeling the baby kick between them. A reminder of everything complicated about this situation. I don't know what to say, she whispered. You don't have to say anything. Just stay. Let me protect you. Let me... He stopped, jaw working. Let me prove I can be more than what I was born to be. Jane's hand came up to cover his, still resting on her face. I need to think. Take all the time you need. But as Jane went back upstairs, climbed into the enormous bed in the enormous room, she knew the truth. She was already in love with him too, and that was going to make everything infinitely more complicated. The attack came 3 days later. Jane was in the library, 7 months pregnant now and moving slowly, when she heard the gunshots. Not in the house. Outside, near the gates. Rapid fire, then shouting. Her heart stopped. The baby kicked frantically, sensing her fear. Ferdinand burst through the library door, his face the hardest she'd ever seen it. Basement, now. What's happening? Now, Jane. He grabbed her hand, pulling her toward a door she'd never noticed before, hidden behind a bookshelf. It opened to reveal stairs leading down into darkness. I don't understand. Marco wasn't working alone. There's a faction that thinks you're making me weak. They're wrong, but they're here. Ferdinand pressed something into her hand. A phone, different from any she'd seen. Basement has a safe room, steel reinforced. You get inside, you lock it, you don't open it for anyone but me. If I'm not back in 2 hours, you call the number programmed as S. He'll get you out. I'm not leaving you. More gunshots. Closer now. Glass shattering somewhere above. You're carrying my child. The words stopped Jane's heart. Maybe not by blood, but she's mine. You're mine. And I will burn this entire city down before I let them touch either of you. He kissed her. Hard, desperate, tasting like goodbye. Go. He pushed her toward the stairs, and Jane stumbled down, her pregnant body clumsy, tears streaming. At the bottom, she found the safe room, exactly as he'd described. She locked herself inside and sank to the floor, pressing both hands to her stomach. It's okay, she whispered to the baby. He's coming back. He has to come back. Upstairs, Ferdinand Torini became the man Chicago feared. There were 12 men. Too many to handle without casualties. But Ferdinand had been preparing for this since Marco's visit, had set traps throughout the house, had positioned his own soldiers at strategic points. The battle was brutal, efficient, final. When silence fell, Ferdinand stood in his destroyed foyer surrounded by bodies, some his enemies, 2 his own men. Blood splattered his shirt. His knuckles were split. His shoulder burned where a bullet had grazed him. But he was alive. He descended to the basement, knocked on the safe room door in the pattern he'd taught Jane. 3 quick, 2 slow, 1 quick. The door opened. Jane stood there, face streaked with tears, and launched herself at him despite her belly. Ferdinand caught her, holding her as tightly as he dared, feeling her sob into his chest. I thought, I'm here. I'm okay. He pressed his lips to her hair. You're safe. It's over. Your shoulder? Graze. Nothing serious. He pulled back, cupping her face. Jane, listen to me. This can't happen again. I need to know you're protected when I'm not here. I need... He stopped, jaw tight. Marry me. Jane blinked. What? Marry me. Legally. Make this official. Make you untouchable. Ferdinand's hands were shaking, shock setting in, but he pushed through it. In my world, a wife has protections. Respect. No one touches the wife of a boss. Ever. You're proposing because of gang politics? I'm proposing because I love you. The politics are just convenient. His thumb brushed her cheekbone. I want to be this baby's father. I want to be your husband. I want to wake up every morning knowing you're mine and I'm yours, and no one will ever make you feel abandoned again. I'm 7 months pregnant with another man's baby. I don't care. People will think you're insane. Let them. Ferdinand. Jane's voice broke. I'm scared. Of me. Of this. Of how much I want it. Of how much I've come to depend on you. She pressed her forehead to his chest. I told myself I'd never need anyone again after George. But I need you. And that terrifies me. Ferdinand's arms tightened around her. I need you too. More than I've needed anything in my entire life. So we'll be scared together. Deal? Jane pulled back, looking up at him. This dangerous man who'd killed people upstairs to keep her safe, who'd somehow become her entire world in 7 months. If I say yes, what happens? We get married. Quietly, Legally. Dr. Chen will deliver the baby here. Don't trust hospitals. You'll be protected by every resource I have. And when she's born..." Ferdinand's hand moved to Jane's stomach, feeling the baby kick. "I'll adopt her. Legally. She'll be mine." "What about George?" "George abandoned you both. He has no claim." Ferdinand's voice hardened. "And if he tries to resurface, he'll answer to me." Jane should have been horrified, should have been questioning this entire insane situation. Instead, she heard herself say, "Okay. Okay? Yes. I'll marry you." Jane felt almost dizzy saying it. "But I have conditions. Anything. I want to be a real wife, not just a protection arrangement. If we do this, we do it honestly. No separate bedrooms, no pretending. Real marriage." Ferdinand's eyes darkened. "Jane, I know I'm 7 months pregnant. I know that's not ideal. But I need to know this is real for you. That you're not just trying to save me out of some misplaced guilt about your mother. This has nothing to do with my mother." Ferdinand pulled her closer, careful of her belly. "This is about you. The way you make coffee in the morning and leave cups everywhere. The way you talk to the baby when you think no one's listening. The way you look at me like I'm not a monster. You're not a monster. I am. But you make me want to be better." He kissed her forehead. "So yes, real marriage. Starting now." They were married the next morning by a judge Ferdinand knew, someone who owed favors and didn't ask questions. Jane wore a simple white dress that accommodated her belly, and Ferdinand wore a dark suit with blood still under his fingernails from the night before. It should have felt wrong. Instead, when Ferdinand slid a platinum band onto her finger and said, "I do," like a vow he'd die keeping, Jane felt something inside her heel. The baby kicked as they kissed, brief, chaste, witnessed by the judge and 2 of Ferdinand's most trusted men. "Mrs. Torini," Ferdinand murmured against her lips. "That's going to take getting used to. You have the rest of our lives." They spent their wedding night in Ferdinand's bedroom, the first time Jane had seen inside. It was surprisingly simple. Dark furniture, soft lighting, massive windows overlooking snow-covered gardens. The bed was enormous, and Ferdinand helped her into it carefully, treating her like spun glass. "I'm pregnant, not broken," Jane said, but she was smiling. "I know. But you're also exhausted, traumatized from yesterday, and approximately 2 months from giving birth to our daughter." He climbed in beside her, pulling her back against his chest. "So tonight, we sleep. Tomorrow, we plan. And in 2 months, we become parents." "Yeah." Ferdinand's hand spread across her belly, feeling the baby move. "We do." Jane laced her fingers through his, feeling the wedding band solid and real. "Do you ever regret it? Stopping that night? Saving me?" "Never. Not even when people shot at your house? Especially not then." Ferdinand's lips brushed her temple. "Because it made me realize what I've been missing my entire life. Purpose beyond violence. Family beyond blood. Home." Jane turned carefully in his arms, facing him in the dim light. "I love you. I should have said it before. When you asked me to marry you. I love you." Ferdinand's eyes closed briefly, like the words physically hurt. "Say it again." "I love you, Ferdinand Torini." "Again. I love you." He kissed her then. Deep, slow, reverent. Not the desperate kiss from before the attack, but something that felt like forever. When they broke apart, both breathless, he pressed his forehead to hers. "Our daughter's lucky to have you as her mother." "Our daughter," Jane repeated, testing the words. "You really mean that?" "I mean everything when it comes to you." Outside, snow began to fall again, and inside, in a house that had been empty for 20 years, two broken people held each other and believed in second chances. Spring came to Chicago with brutal suddenty. One day, buried under snow, the next, alive with green. Jane went into labor on a Tuesday morning in late April, 8 months and 3 weeks into her pregnancy. She'd been in the library, reorganizing the Italian philosophy section for the 3rd time, when her water broke all over Ferdinand's first edition of The Prince. "Ferdinand!" Her voice came out strangled. "Ferdinand, it's time!" He appeared from his office within seconds, phone already in hand. "Dr. Chen's on his way. How far apart are the contractions?" "I don't..." Jane gasped as another one hit, stealing her breath. "Close. They're close." Ferdinand swept her into his arms, carrying her upstairs to the bedroom they'd been sharing for 2 months. The room had been transformed. A bassinet now stood near the windows. A changing table stocked with supplies Jane had never bought but appeared anyway. Ferdinand's doing, always. Dr. Chen arrived within 15 minutes, bag in hand, calm as ever. "Let's have a baby, shall we?" Labor was 14 hours of pain Jane had never imagined possible. Ferdinand never left her side. He held her hand through contractions that made her scream, wiped her face with cool cloths, whispered in Italian when English failed him. Words Jane didn't understand but felt in her bones. "I can't," Jane sobbed during hour 12. "I can't do this." "Yes, you can." Ferdinand's forehead pressed to hers, his hand gripping hers so tightly she felt bones grind. "You're the strongest person I know. You survived. Everything life threw at you. This baby, our baby, she's going to know her mother never gave up. Not once. It hurts, I know, amore. But you're almost there. Just a little more." At 11:47 p.m., Sofia Elena Torini entered the world screaming. Dr. Chen placed her on Jane's chest, and Jane stared at the tiny, perfect creature in her arms, unable to process that this was real. The baby had dark hair, lots of it, and when she finally opened her eyes, they were a murky gray-blue that would probably change but looked exactly like Ferdinand's. "She's perfect," Jane whispered, crying so hard she could barely see. Ferdinand stood frozen at the bedside, staring at the baby like he'd witnessed a miracle. Dr. Chen cleared his throat. "Would you like to cut the cord, Mr. Torini?" Ferdinand looked at Jane. "Can I?" "She's yours." Jane's voice was fierce despite her exhaustion. "Cut the cord." He did, hands shaking slightly, and when Dr. Chen took Sophia to clean and measure her, Ferdinand sank onto the bed beside Jane, pulling her against him. "Thank you," he said into her hair. "Thank you for giving me this, for giving me her, for giving me us. I didn't give you anything. You saved us." "No, you saved me." They held each other while Dr. Chen worked, and when he returned Sophia, now clean, swaddled, and making small, mewling sounds, Ferdinand took her with the careful reverence of someone holding the entire world. "Ciao, Piccola," he whispered. "I'm your papa. I've been waiting to meet you." Sophia yawned, tiny fist escaping the swaddle to wave aimlessly. Ferdinand caught her hand with one finger, and she gripped it instinctively. Something broke in his expression. Years of walls, of control, of refusing to let anyone close. Jane watched him fall completely in love with a baby who wasn't his by blood, and knew she'd made the right choice. Dr. Chen stayed overnight, monitoring them both, and left in the morning after pronouncing Sophia healthy and Jane recovering well. The next few weeks blurred together in a haze of feeding schedules, diaper changes, and the kind of exhaustion Jane hadn't known existed. Ferdinand was tireless. He learned to change diapers with military efficiency, walked the halls at 3 a.m. with Sophia against his chest, sang Italian lullabies his mother had taught him. He hired a night nurse for the first week to help Jane recover, but after that, he insisted they do it themselves. "I want to be the one she comes to," he explained one night, rocking Sophia while Jane tried to eat soup with her eyes closed. "I missed my sister's childhood. I won't miss Sophia's." On Sophia's 2-month birthday, Ferdinand's lawyer arrived with paperwork. "Adoption papers," Ferdinand explained, spreading them on the kitchen island while Sophia slept in her bouncer nearby. "I'm officially adopting her, making it legal, making her mine." Jane scanned the documents. George's parental rights? Terminated. He never registered as the father, never made contact. Legally, he abandoned her. Ferdinand's jaw tightened. If he ever shows his face, he'll find out exactly what happens to men who abandon pregnant women in my world. "Ferdinand." "I'm serious, Jane. That man left you to die. Left Sophia before she was even born. He doesn't get to call himself her father now." Jane signed the papers without hesitation. 3 days later, a judge finalized the adoption in Ferdinand's study, the same judge who'd married them, looking slightly more comfortable this time. When he handed over the amended birth certificate listing Ferdinand Alessandro Torini as Sophia's father, Ferdinand stared at it for a full minute without speaking. "Thank you," he finally said to Jane, voice rough, "for letting me be her father." "You already were." Jane bounced Sophia gently, feeling the baby's solid weight. "This just makes it official." That evening, Ferdinand carried them both to the room at the end of the hall, the one that had been locked since Jane arrived. He opened it for the first time, and Jane gasped. The room was a nursery. Pale yellow walls, white furniture, a mural of an Italian countryside painted across one wall, a rocking chair by the windows, shelves already filled with books in both English and Italian. "I started this the day after you agreed to marry me," Ferdinand admitted, setting Sophia carefully in the crib. "I wanted her to have her own space, a real room, not just existing in ours." Jane moved to the mural, touching the painted cypress trees. "This is beautiful." "It's Tuscany, where my mother was born." Ferdinand stood beside her, Sophia sleeping peacefully behind them. "I thought maybe someday we could take Sophia there, show her where part of her family came from." "Ferdinand." Jane turned to him, seeing the vulnerability in his face. "You know she'll ask questions eventually, about George, about why she doesn't look like either of us. And we'll tell her the truth, that her biological father was a coward who couldn't handle the responsibility, that I chose to be her father because I fell in love with her mother and couldn't imagine life without either of them." He cupped Jane's face. "Biology doesn't make family. Choice does." They stood in the nursery, watching their daughter sleep, and Jane marveled at how far they'd come. 10 months ago she'd been crashed in a ditch, bleeding and terrified. Now she stood in a custom nursery with a man who'd turned his world upside down to make her his family. 6 months later, on a crisp October morning, Jane found Ferdinand in the library. He'd been working from home full-time since Sophia's birth, conducting business from his office while Jane and the baby were upstairs. The balance worked. He protected them, provided for them, but never let the violence of his world touch their daughter. "Sophia's down for her nap," Jane said, settling into the chair across from his desk. "And I wanted to talk to you about something." Ferdinand set down his, papers immediately. "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong, actually." Jane pulled out a small box from her pocket, pushing it across the desk. "I wanted to give you this." Ferdinand opened it carefully. Inside was a platinum watch, elegant and expensive, with an engraving on the back, Per Sempre. J and S. "Forever," Ferdinand translated, voice rough. "You gave me everything. A home, safety, Sophia's name, your love. I wanted to give you something too. Jane swallowed hard. I know I'll never make as much money as you. I know my gift seems small compared to everything you've done. It's perfect. Ferdinand stood, moving around the desk to pull Jane into his arms. It's perfect because it's from you. They stood like that for a long time, two people who'd found each other in a storm and built something unshakable. Upstairs, Sophia woke from her nap and began to cry, not distressed, just announcing she was awake. Both parents heard it immediately through the baby monitor. I'll get her, Ferdinand said. We'll both go. They climbed the stairs together, entered the nursery where Sophia stood in her crib, chubby hands gripping the rails. When she saw them, her face split into a gummy smile that made Jane's heart ache. Papa! Sophia crowed, reaching for Ferdinand with both arms. She'd started saying it last week, her first word. Not mama, which had made Jane pretend to be offended while secretly finding it hilarious. Sophia was absolutely a daddy's girl, following Ferdinand around the house, crying when he left for meetings, lighting up like the sun when he returned. Ferdinand lifted her, and Sophia immediately grabbed his face with both hands, planting a wet, sloppy kiss on his cheek. Ciao, Principessa, he murmured, kissing her forehead. Did you have a good nap? Sophia babbled something unintelligible, then reached for Jane. Mama. There it was. Second word. Jane took her daughter, feeling the solid weight of her, breathing in the baby smell that somehow made everything better. Should we take her to the gardens? Ferdinand suggested. The leaves are changing. She'd like that. They went outside, into the gardens Jane had only seen through windows when she'd first arrived. Now, in autumn, the grounds were a riot of gold and red and orange. Ferdinand had hired a gardener who planted seasonal flowers in beds Sophia could toddle through safely. They spread a blanket near the fountain, and Sophia immediately began crawling toward the falling water, fascinated by the sound. Ferdinand followed her, hovering close enough to catch her if she toppled but letting her explore. Jane watched them, her husband and her daughter, and felt something settle deep in her chest. Peace, belonging, home. I never thought I'd have this, she said when Ferdinand returned. Sophia balanced on his hip. Have what? This. Family. Safety. Someone who looks at me like I'm worth protecting. Jane stood, moving close enough to rest her head on Ferdinand's shoulder, completing the circle. Someone who loves my daughter like she's his own. She is mine. Ferdinand's arm came around Jane's waist, holding them both. You both are. Nothing will ever change that. Sophia squirmed, wanting down, and they let her crawl through the leaves, laughing when she tried to eat them. The afternoon sun filtered through the trees, turning everything golden, and for a moment, just a moment, the violence of Ferdinand's world felt very far away. That night, after Sophia was asleep, Jane and Ferdinand lay in bed, wrapped around each other in the comfortable silence of people who didn't need words. I never thanked you, Jane said quietly, for stopping that night, for saving me. You've thanked me 1,000 times. Not properly, not... Jane propped herself up on one elbow, looking down at him. You could have driven past. It would have been easier, safer. But you stopped. You pulled me out of that car. You brought me here. You gave me everything. Ferdinand's hand came up to cup her face. You gave me more. You gave me a reason to be better than what I was. You gave me Sophia. You gave me this. He gestured around the room, but Jane knew he meant more than the physical space. A life worth living instead of just surviving. I love you. Jane kissed him softly. I will love you for the rest of my life. Per sempre, Ferdinand whispered against her lips. Forever. Sometimes the people who save us are the last ones we expect. Sometimes salvation comes from the most dangerous places. Sometimes family isn't about blood. It's about who stays when the storm hits, who holds you when you fall, and who loves you through the fear and mess and beautiful chaos of building a life together. Jane Mitchell thought she was alone in that crashed car, bleeding and abandoned. But Ferdinand Turini saw her protecting her unborn child, even while unconscious. And something in him, something that had been broken since childhood, recognized the chance for redemption. They saved each other. The woman who learned to trust again. The man who learned that strength isn't about power. It's about knowing when to kneel, when to catch someone falling, and when to love so fiercely that nothing can tear you apart. And Sophia? She grew up knowing that her father chose her. That love isn't something you're born into. It's something you build day by day, diaper change by diaper change, story by story, until the house that used to echo with emptiness fills up with laughter and chaos and the beautiful mess of family. If this story touched something in you, we'd love to hear about it in the comments below. What moment hit you hardest? Would you have trusted Ferdinand? Have you ever met someone who changed your entire life in one moment? Hit that like button to support more stories about love, redemption, and second chances. Subscribe to Nom du Canal. We bring you emotional journeys like this one every single day. And before you go, check out the next video on your screen or dive into our playlist for more tales of unexpected families and fierce protectors. Thank you for spending this time with us. Until next time, stay safe, stay hopeful, and remember, even in the darkest storm, someone might stop. Someone might open their door. Someone might give you the family you thought you'd lost forever. Good night.